and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja, and these are the headlines. The Taliban say there won't be peace in Afghanistan until President Ashrafi is removed. In an interview, spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said there must be an agreement on a new government before any ceasefire. China says the United States is slandering its efforts to pursue criminal suspects overseas. In a briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian urged Washington to correct its mistakes. This comes after a Chinese prosecutor was charged in an alleged plot to intimidate citizens to return. Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Kashmir's Sopore town. They were targeted during a night-long operation in the Varpura area. Brazil has registered more than 1,400 new COVID-19 deaths and nearly 50,000 new cases overnight. In Pakistan, the virus has claimed 11 lives and infected more than 1,400 people in the past 24 hours. Globally, there are more than 4.1 million fatalities and over 192 million cases so far. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. The Taliban say there won't be peace in Afghanistan until President Ashrafi is removed. In an interview, spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said there must be an agreement on a new government before any ceasefire. However, Shaheen rejected the notion that the Taliban want to monopolize power. He called Ghani a warmonger, accusing him of using his Eid speech to promise an offensive. Shaheen dismissed the Afghan president's right to govern amid allegations of widespread fraud in the 2019 election. Earlier, the group said it will stick to its policy on peace despite being in a strong military position. The Taliban say the recent United States airstrikes violate the Doha deal. Spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said Washington will be responsible for the consequences if it conducts further operations. In a statement, Mujahid confirmed that 3 fighters were killed in the raids on the outskirts of Kandahar. Earlier, Pentagon said the raids show Washington's commitment to helping the Afghan forces. Meanwhile, Kabul says the Taliban claim of controlling 90% of the Afghan border is an absolute lie. However, the Taliban say they have captured the Ghazibad district of the Kunar province and arrested 140 government soldiers. China says the United States is slandering its efforts to pursue criminal suspects overseas. In a briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian urged Washington to correct its mistakes. This comes after a Chinese prosecutor was charged in an alleged plot to intimidate citizens to return. The Justice Department accused him of traveling to the United States to direct a harassment campaign. Tu Lan is the latest defendant in a sprawling investigation that has led to charges against 9 people. Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Kashmir's Sopore town. The Kashmiris were targeted during a night-long operation in the Varpura area. The forces have also suspended internet services in the area. Indian occupying forces have killed more than 400 civilians since the revocation of the occupied valley's special status. Pakistan has slammed India's state-sponsored and widespread surveillance and spying operations. Islamabad said it is monitoring the situation and will highlight Indian abuses at appropriate global platforms. Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi will be visiting China today at the invitation of his counterpart, Wang Yi. The Foreign Office says they will discuss CPEC, defense and security cooperation, COVID-19 vaccines, and counterterrorism. It said the visit will boost the all-weather bilateral partnership. The two-day visit is part of the celebrations for the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. More than 100 events have been planned, over 60 of which have been held so far. Pakistan's coronavirus tally has crossed 1 million, with 1,400 cases reported overnight. The health ministry says the virus has claimed 11 more lives in the past 24 hours. Officials say the death toll is approaching 23,000. They say more than 923,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. Pakistan's positivity rate stands at 5.65% after people celebrated Eid al-Adha. There are more than 53,000 active cases, with 2,500 in critical condition. Brazil has registered more than 1,400 new COVID-19 deaths and nearly 50,000 cases overnight. Globally, there are more than 4.1 million fatalities and over 192 million cases. More in this report. Experts believe following SOPs such as wearing masks and social distancing are as important as vaccines, as none of them alone can prevent the spread of COVID-19. Argentina is one of the first countries to widely use Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. It has ratcheted up pressure on Moscow over delays in the arrival of second doses. Meanwhile, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has not revised its mask guidance, even as the Delta variant sweeps the country. Doctors are worried the current surge will ultimately be worse than the 2020 crisis.
Starting really the 1st of June, we saw an escalation in our inpatient COVID admissions, and that probably the most alarming part in the beginning. It happened very fast. So we marked our surge last year, really started around September 1st, and the peak hit December 28th. So 150 days to span that from about 24 to 113. We crossed that same number in 36 days this year.
EU countries have so far donated just a tiny portion of excess vaccines to poor nations, mostly AstraZeneca shots. France's COVID advisor to the government says the fourth wave of infections will hit hospitals in the second half of August. Meanwhile, Greece says all unvaccinated restaurant and tourism workers nationwide must undergo regular COVID-19 tests. Daily contact testing will be rolled out to workplaces in Britain's food sector. Staff pinged by the COVID-19 app will keep working if they test negative rather than isolating. Over in Australia, the largest state of New South Wales has urged the federal government to divert vaccine doses to Sydney. The state has also reported the biggest daily rise in new COVID-19 cases this year, prompting a national emergency. Neighboring New Zealand will pause quarantine-free travel with Australia for at least 8 weeks over the outbreak of the Delta variant there.
There is greater risk now from the Delta variant than there was when we opened the quarantine-free travel arrangement with Australia. It is the government's duty to keep New Zealanders safe from COVID-19, and we continue to believe that the strongest health response is also the strongest economic response. This approach has served us well to date. So too is our willingness to adapt. COVID has changed, and so we must.
The Philippines will ban travelers coming from Malaysia and Thailand. It will also tighten restrictions in the Manila area in a bid to prevent the spread of the contagious Delta variant. Israeli occupational forces have detained 8 Palestinians from multiple districts in the West Bank. The Palestinian Prisoner Society says those held include 4 people freed earlier from Israeli jails. The society said the Palestinians were arrested in Tuba City and the town of Tumman. The occupation forces set up several checkpoints in towns and villages to the south of Jenin. They also stormed the town of Bita, south of Nablus, leading to clashes. The forces fired tear gas and stun grenades towards the residents, injuring a youth in the mouth. The United Nations says its former rights chief will lead an inquiry into abuses in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. A commission of inquiry is the highest level investigation that can be ordered by the Human Rights Council. The 3-person commission will investigate all underlying root causes of recurrent tensions. The council agreed to launch the investigation in May after Israel killed at least 250 Palestinians in the bombing on Gaza. Human Rights Chief Michel Bachelet has earlier said Israeli strikes on Gaza might constitute as war crimes. The commission is set to report to the Human Rights Council each year from June 2022. The United States has imposed sanctions on the Cuban defense minister and other officials over a crackdown on anti-government protests. U.S. President Joe Biden said the sanctions are only the first step in the American response. He also condemned alleged mass detentions and sham trials in Cuba. Thousands of Cubans took to the streets a week ago in protest against the country's looming economic crisis. In central China, authorities have stepped up recovery efforts in rain-battered Hsinchu as water floods begin to recede. Rescuers are trying to reach the trapped and the stranded in the deluged city of 12 million. Tens of thousands of rescue workers, including the military and volunteers, have been deployed across the Henan province. Hsinchu, the capital city of the Henan province, is still immersed in high water. At least 12 people have died while being trapped in the city's inundated subway. Flooding has claimed 33 lives in the province over the recent days. Rescue professionals from neighboring provinces have been called in. Ecuador has declared a state of emergency in its prison system after riots at 2 jails left 22 dead and 57 injured. President Guillermo Lasso issued the decree to mobilize all necessary resources to re-establish order. Lasso said the military would be in charge of controlling the prison perimeter and entry. Meanwhile, police officers would control the inside. Until now, civilians trained as prison guards were in charge of the indoor security. Prison authorities earlier suspended all activities that could put the population and administrative personnel at risk. The G20's climate conference will resume today for its second and final day in Naples. Italy says that the bloc has finally agreed to a communiqué on the climate after weeks of negotiations and a 2-day nonstop session. Ecological Minister Roberto Cingolani said the document covers food security, the sustainable use of water, and sustainable finance. The G20 meeting discussed biodiversity and the natural environment on Thursday. Meanwhile, energy and climate change will be on today's agenda. However, near the Royal Palace in Naples, thousands protested against the alleged lack of action on global warming. Earlier in a statement, the U.S. Treasury Secretary urged for mobilizing more capital to fight climate change. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. European stocks are trading cautiously higher as investors monitor a slew of economic data, along with fresh corporate earnings. The CAC 40 in Paris and Italy's FTSE MIB are leading the gains, rising closer to 1%. London's FTSE and the Pan-European Stock 600 also added more than 0.75%. Frankfurt's DAX advanced over 0.5%. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.